So you'll know for the second week in a row, I have Ohio State ranked number 1 in my top 25. There are a couple reasons for this. The first one is Ohio State has not played with its full complement of weapons since week 1 when they beat Notre Dame 21-10. If anything, that speaks more highly of Notre Dame than it does how bad or not great you think Ohio State is, because every week since, Ohio State has been dominant without its full complement of offensive weapons. We're talking about games without Jackson Smith-Njigba, Julian Fleming, Travion Henderson, Mayan Williams. We're talking about Jackson Smith-Njigba not just having only played 2 games halfway through the season, but having caught just 4 passes. And that was a guy going into this season that had really great Heisman odds. And obviously you have to be productive to be a Heisman contender. But in his stead, the wide receiver group has just been outstanding. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka in particular have been holding it down on the outside. And then you have quite literally the best quarterback in the game today in C.J. Stroud throwing them passes. And then defensively, they've been able to put the shackles on people. I mentioned Tommy Eichenberg and Ronnie Hickman and Tanner McAllister in our Saturday Live recap show. But I also need to point out that when Mike Hall has been able to play defensive tackle when they allow it, he has just been a wrecking ball down there for them. Really like seeing Zach Harrison in a stand-up 9 at that jack linebacker spot. It's a lot of fun for me to see. Alabama, I just stayed at number 2, and Georgia stayed at number 3. But interestingly enough, the AP voters are displaying a level of SEC bias that we've just come to accept from them, as SEC has been the best conference in football if you're taking a look at national championships and who gets to play in the college football playoff and what it means to play in the SEC championship game. That said, both Alabama and Georgia have shown that they can be beat if you have the talent on the other side of the field to match them if they decide not to play to their full strength. So an example of this would be Georgia playing against Missouri. They need to come back from a double-digit deficit to beat a 2-4 Missouri. And then you saw it, and we talked about it with A&M and Alabama. I'm looking for dominance for my number 1 ranked team. That's why I moved Georgia the week after they put up 49 and allowed just 3 against Oregon at that number 1 spot. And one of the reasons I thought that they were going to retain that spot is they would be that dominant all the way through, and it just hasn't been the case. Now, Auburn is bad, and you put up 42 on Auburn, but you're also in a popularity contest right now. It's a pageant contest. You have to run it up if you want people to believe in you. And I guess that's exactly what they did, because there's a person out there that says they answered the call about, are you good? And I'm going, nah, not against Auburn. I don't care that you put up 42 on Auburn. You could put 42 up on the University of Tulsa, and I still wouldn't give you credit for that. As a matter of fact, it doesn't mean that much now. I need to see what you are able to do against everybody. And if you're allowing Kent State to score more on you than Auburn, we still got to talk about that. That's not something I get to let slide, all right? To say nothing of just what it means for you to get back to the SEC championship game this year, in which we expect Alabama and Georgia to be there again, playing for not just conference supremacy, but the better spot in the college football playoff, because we know by now the selection committee is likely to put 2 SEC teams in there named Alabama and Georgia. I also thought it was kind of interesting that for the most part, I agree with the Associated Press. Now, they flipped Michigan and Clemson. I had Michigan at 4 and Clemson at 5. But the more I thought about this, the more I said, okay, I see what you mean with Clemson in that they've beaten 2 top 25 opponents in a row in North Carolina State, who needed a late interception to hold off Florida State on Saturday night. And of course, they were able to beat down Boston College on Saturday night and then survive against what everybody believes is a really good Wake Forest team. I have Wake Forest at 17. They have them at 14. I have Michigan at number 4 here because as booty and bad as the non-conference schedule has been, when they get into Big Ten competition against teams that I think are good, they've shown that they have a backbone, and not just a backbone, but that they're balanced. All right. Against Indiana, it's 10-10 at half. Indiana was the first to give up a loss in the Big Ten to in Nebraska last week. So they're not necessarily that good. As a matter of fact, they end up firing the offensive line coach on Sunday morning and moving offensive analyst Rod Carey, who was also at one point head coach at Indiana, into that role. But it's just more about the defense has convinced me that losing Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo has not really hurt them. If anything, Mike Morris is showing that he is a dude that can be depended on. Yabe Onoma, has been proven he's a dude that can be depended on. They're really good in the defensive secondary, and we just don't talk about it a bunch. And now you have a quarterback that I can believe in. Another reason why they shot up the rankings for me. I wanted to see J.J. McCarthy in this position to start the season, and eventually Jim Harbaugh, Sharon Moore, and Matt Weiss saw it my way as well, with J.J. McCarthy going for over 300 passing yards against a good Indiana defense, and Blake Corum continuing to do Blake Corum things. I think that they're going to be really a handful by the end of the season when we get to the game between Ohio State and Michigan. And I would find it really funny and or fascinating that we might end up with two, really good Big Ten teams that don't get to play in the Big Ten championship game, and we'll suffer because of it. If anything, that's my reason for just abolishing divisions in the Big Ten. The way that Alabama and Georgia get two teams into the college football playoff is because they play a championship game against each other. If Ohio State and Michigan were allowed to play another game against each other for the Big Ten championship game, I think that that's going to help everybody inside the Big Ten. And then perhaps we get to see two Big Ten teams in the college football playoff and not just two SEC teams. Now, I don't really have a problem with where they have Tennessee at number 6. I have them at 7. Tennessee's a good football team. They get to try to get their first win against Alabama since 2006 on Saturday. I was a high school senior in 2006. It's been that long since Tennessee has been able to get past Alabama, and the way that Alabama is playing, they play like that like they did against A&M against Tennessee. I'm not going to be shocked to see Tennessee win that game. I still got my hang-ups on USC, mostly that they're not as good defensively as I want them to be, and Caleb Williams has shown that he is fallible, but Travis Dye has been carrying the load for them. 4 out of the last 5 games at USC, he's rushed for over 100 yards and really backed up his defense when they needed somebody that could just salt the game away. I'm glad to see that the Associated Press still has respect for Kansas and how they played that game against Texas Christian. Really great game, great chess match between those two coaches. But Texas Christian vaults to number 13 for me and number 13 for the Associated Press. We agree on that. As we keep going down, not a whole lot of change here. I mean, Kansas State barely beat Iowa State 10-9, but a win is a win. And then Syracuse, for me, makes its debut off of a bye, being 5-0, but now they got a ranked matchup, I believe, against NC State coming. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then Texas, who I think is the best 2-loss team in college football. A dubious honor, you might say or think, but I put it this way. You have a 1-point loss to Alabama, a former number 1 in the preseason poll and during the year, and you have a 1-point loss to Texas Tech, who's demonstrated that they are going to give everybody hell. They're going to be really tough to play football against, as Oklahoma State found out in their bid to be 6-0. So I'm looking at 1-point losses that if they go one way or the other, you make a field goal against Alabama, Bijan Robinson doesn't put the ball on the ground, they're undefeated at 6-0, and they are playing to the caliber that I thought they would play with when I said Texas is back. I just would prefer that you did not demonstrate that Texas is back over the dead body of my Oklahoma Sooners. 49-0 that game was, and it will live in infamy in the Sooner State for all time. You don't get over that sort of loss, and it's going to be the thing that Texas fans bring up as much as they bring up that Oklahoma recruits the state of Texas, as if Alabama, Georgia, even Clemson don't recruit the state of Texas. It's a large state, and it's a really good high school football state. So yeah, you're going to dive in there. You're going to take what you can get. One fact I want to go back to Oklahoma State on here, number 6 for me and number 8 for the Associated Press. Counted up this morning. There are 22 super seniors on that Oklahoma State roster. 22, not regular seniors, 5th-year seniors. They are experienced, they are savvy, and now they have a quarterback they believe in that doesn't throw the ball to the other team or put the ball on the ground. It's been that simple for the last couple of years for Oklahoma State. If Spencer Sanders doesn't turn the ball over, they probably win games going away. I thought it was going to take a step back with the defense, Derek Mason taking over for Jim Knowles, who's at Ohio State now, but that hasn't happened. I thought they would miss Malcolm Rodriguez more than they have. They miss him, but not as much as I thought they would. And now they get to play against Texas Christian in a battle for Big 12 supremacy, 2 undefeated teams. Very excited about that. I ended up going my last 5 here: Kansas, Texas, Minnesota, North Carolina, Coastal, and Cincinnati. And then the last 5 for the Associated Press end up being Utah. I don't really think that much of them anymore, huh? Cincinnati, Texas, Kentucky, Illinois, and then James Madison. James Madison is 6-0. They make their first ever appearance in the Associated Press poll. And this is after they were playing FCS football last year, and they're in the Sun Belt, which is the little SEC. That's a tough conference, man. So you got 2 undefeated teams in Coastal and James Madison, and that's an outstanding and great story. So that's how I see the top 25 as we get just past the halfway point, setting up for what I think is going to be a delicious Week 7 with Oklahoma State, Texas Christian, Penn State, Michigan, and Alabama, Tennessee, just for starters. I'm very excited to see what football is in store for this week. Thank you for watching the #1 college football show. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and like this video so that you don't miss any of the best college football coverage in America.